The emergency alarm pierced through the quiet halls of the Calorian Council building. Chancellor Vexstar rushed into the command center, his 4 eyes quickly scanning the massive displays that covered the walls. Each screen showed the same terrible truth. Another world had gone dark. "How many this time?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Replied commanders, sir," replied Commander Calthera, her voice shaking. "The Vorthok hive consumed them all in less than 6 hours. Our defensive fleets, they didn't even slow them down." Vexstar stared at the tactical display. Red dots marked the dead worlds, spreading like a disease across their territory. The Vorthok hive had been unstoppable for 3 cycles now. Appeared without warning, stripped entire planets of all life, and moved on to the next target. No negotiation, no mercy, just endless hunger. "What about our remaining fleets?" Vexstar asked. "Admiral Zekmora's battle group made their last stand at Kolora 7, Calthara reported. "We lost contact 2 hours ago. Long-range sensors show only debris fields." Chancellor's legs gave out, and he collapsed into his command chair. The Calorian Federation had existed for over 2,000 years. It explored distant stars, made contact with dozens of peaceful species, and built a civilization based on knowledge and cooperation. Now it would all end in a matter of days, sir, called out Communications Officer Telvana from across the room. "We're receiving reports from our outer colonies. The hive is moving faster than before. They'll reach our core worlds within 72 hours. Vexstar closed his eyes. Calorians were herbivores by nature, peaceful beings who had never developed advanced weapons or military tactics. They had always believed that intelligence and diplomacy could solve any problem. The Vorthok hive proved them wrong in the most terrible way possible. "What are our options?" he asked his advisors. Science advisor Morkith stepped forward. "We could evacuate the remaining population to the Outer Rim territories, hide in deep space until the hive moves on." "For how long?" Vexstar demanded. "They've consumed 47 different species across this galaxy. They don't stop. They don't move on. They just keep eating until nothing is left." "Then we fight," suggested Military Coordinator Belterra, though her voice lacked conviction. "With what?" Vexstar laughed bitterly. "Our remaining ships are cargo vessels and science explorers. We have maybe 10,000 security officers across all our worlds. The hive sends millions of biowarriors to each planet." The command center fell silent. Everyone knew the truth. The Calorian Federation was doomed. Their advanced technology meant nothing against an enemy that turned entire worlds into feeding grounds. "Wait," Telvana said suddenly. "There is one option we haven't considered." All eyes turned to her. "The emergency broadcast protocol," she continued. "We could send a distress signal across all known frequencies. Ask for help from any spacefaring civilization?" Commander Calthera shook her head. "The nearest friendly species are the Zephyrians, and they're 3 weeks away. Even if they wanted to help, they don't have the military strength to face the hive." "Not just friendly species," Telvana insisted. "I mean everyone. Every civilization we've ever detected, even the ones we've never made contact with. Someone out there might have the power to help us." Vexstar considered this. It was a desperate plan, but they were desperate people. "What would we offer in return?" "Everything," Telvana replied. "Our knowledge, our technology, our loyalty, whatever they want in exchange for helping us survive." The Chancellor looked around the room. These were the smartest minds in the Federation, and none of them had any better ideas. "Do it," he ordered. "Send the signal on all frequencies, all languages. Tell them we're dying and ask for help." Telvana's hands moved quickly across her. "Console." The communication array powered up, drawing energy from the planet's main reactor. The message was simple, but desperate. A plea for help from a dying civilization. "Signal broadcasting now, sir," Telvana reported. "Full spectrum transmission across all known space lanes." The message traveled through space at the speed of light, reaching star system after star system. Most civilizations that received it were too far away or too weak to help. Others were busy fighting their own battles against various threats, but the signal continued traveling. Past the mapped territories of the galactic community, beyond the trade routes and diplomatic channels, into regions of space marked as unexplored or dangerous. It reached areas that most species avoided. Sectors labeled with warnings about hostile environments or unknown hazards. In one particular region, marked in ancient star charts as the quarantine zone, the signal was detected by a small blue-green world. The planet was listed in galactic databases as a Class 12 death world. A place so hostile that no civilized species should be able to survive there. But something had survived there. Something that had been quietly watching the galaxy for decades, learning about the various species and their struggles. Something that took promises very seriously, especially promises to help those who couldn't help themselves. The Colonials had made what they thought was their last desperate gamble. They had no way of knowing that they had just contacted the one species in the galaxy that considered impossible odds to be merely another day at work. Lieutenant Commander Hyan Wu. Kim was halfway through his third cup of coffee when the Deep Space Monitoring Station's computers started screaming. Red lights flashed across every screen in the small facility buried beneath the mountains of South Korea. He had been watching empty space for 2 years. Nothing this exciting had ever happened. "What the hell?" he muttered, rushing to the main console. Universal Translator program was working overtime, trying to decode something that definitely wasn't human in origin. The message appeared on his screen piece by piece. As the computers worked through the alien language, when the full translation finally displayed, Hyan Wu nearly dropped his coffee mug. "We are dying. Our worlds are being consumed by an enemy we cannot fight. We offer everything we have in exchange for help. Please, if anyone receives this message, we are the Calorian Federation and we need help now." Hyan Wu stared at the message for a full minute. First contact, actual aliens. And they were asking for help. His hands shook as he reached for the red phone that connected directly to Seoul Military Command. "This is Monitor Station 7, he said when the line connected. "I need to speak to Admiral Lee immediately. We have a Code Alpha situation." Within 30 minutes, Admiral Ji-hoon Lee was standing in the monitoring station, reading the alien message for himself. The Admiral was a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes. He'd fought in 3 different wars and never backed down from a fight. "How far away are they?" Admiral Lee asked. "About 72 hours at maximum hyperspace speed," replied Captain Minho Park, who had arrived with a team of navigation specialists. "But sir, we don't know anything about this enemy they're facing." Admiral Lee studied the star charts. "Tell me about these Calorians." Dr. So-young Park, the military's top expert on alien communications, pulled up her analysis. "Based on their language patterns and message content, they appear to be a peaceful species. Herbivores, most likely. They mention offering knowledge and technology in exchange for help, which suggests they're scientifically advanced but not militarily prepared. And this enemy that's killing them, he called them the Vorthok Hive. The message mentions worlds being consumed, which suggests either strip mining or something worse." Admiral Lee was quiet for a long moment. He had spent his entire career preparing for threats to Earth, but he had never imagined Earth might need to defend someone else. Still, the decision came easily to him. If someone asks for help and we can provide it, then we help them. That's what makes us human. He turned to Captain Park. "I want Battle Group Taigok ready to launch in 6 hours. Full deployment." Captain Park's eyes widened. "Sir, that's 127 ships. Are you sure we need that many for a rescue mission?" "We don't know what we're flying into," Admiral Lee replied. "Better to have too much firepower than not enough. These aliens are dying, Captain. We're going to make sure they don't." The next 6 hours were chaos. Battle Group Taigok was the pride of Earth's defense fleet, but it had never been deployed all at once. Ships that had been scattered across the solar system began converging on the launch point near Mars. Yoon Kim arrived with 50,000 Marines from the Terra Defense Corps. These were soldiers who had trained in Earth's most extreme environments, the bottom of the ocean, the peaks of mountains, the heat of deserts, and the cold of Antarctica. They were used to fighting in places where most humans couldn't even survive. "What's the mission profile?" General Kim asked Admiral Lee as they watched the fleet assemble. "Humanitarian intervention," Admiral Lee replied. We're going to save a dying species from something called the Vorthok hive. General Kim nodded. My Marines are ready. If these aliens need protection, they'll get it. The ships of Battle Group Taigok were impressive by any standard. The dreadnought Sol Ascendant served as the flagship, surrounded by heavy cruisers. Named after Earth's major cities, destroyers and corvettes filled out the formation, each one carrying enough firepower to level a small moon to the humans. This was standard procedure for responding to an unknown threat. Earth's military doctrine was simple when facing the unknown. Bring enough force to handle anything you might encounter. They had learned this lesson the hard way during their own violent history. What the humans didn't realize was that by galactic standards, they were assembling an invasion fleet. Most species in the galaxy had never seen more than 20 warships in one place. The idea of over 100 military vessels working together was beyond their imagination. Dr. So-Young Park made final adjustments to the communication systems. Admiral, we should be able to establish contact with the Colorians as soon as we arrive. I've programmed the translators with their language patterns. Good, Admiral Lee said. We want them to know we're there to help, not to conquer. The fleet launched exactly 6 hours after the decision was made. 127 human warships entered hyperspace, carrying 50,000 soldiers toward a species they had never met, to fight an enemy they knew nothing about. As the ships disappeared into the void, Admiral Lee stood on the bridge of his flagship and wondered what they would find when they arrived. He hoped they weren't too late to help. The Colorian homeworld's orbital defense grid had been designed to detect incoming asteroids and space debris, not massive military fleets. When the sensors started registering hyperspace distortions 12 minutes out, the technicians thought their equipment was malfunctioning. Sir, we're getting impossible readings, reported sensor operator Velkara, her voice rising with panic. The computers are showing over 100 large objects approaching from hyperspace. Chancellor Vexstar rushed to the orbital command center. 3 days had passed since they sent their desperate message, and the Vorthok hive was already consuming the outer colonies. He had given up hope of rescue, focusing instead on evacuation plans that would save maybe 10% of their population. Show me, he ordered. The main display lit up with tracking data. Red markers appeared one by one as the sensors locked onto each incoming vessel. 10 ships, 20, 50. The numbers kept climbing. Great ancestors preserve us, whispered science advisor Morketh. What have we done? Chancellor Vexstar stared in horror as the final count appeared. 127 ships, and this wasn't a rescue fleet. This was an invasion armada larger than anything in recorded galactic history. Are they responding to our message? He asked weakly. Unknown, sir. We're not detecting any communication attempts yet. The Chancellor's mind raced. Had their desperate call for help attracted something worse than the Vorthok hive? Were they about to be conquered by whatever species lived in the forbidden zones of space? 12 minutes later, the human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. The massive ships took up positions around the Colorian homeworld with military precision that spoke of centuries of warfare experience. The flagship, Sol Ascendant, was 3 times larger than the biggest Colorian vessel ever built. The heavy cruisers that flanked it bristled with weapon systems that the Colorian sensors couldn't even identify. The smaller destroyers and corvettes moved like a school of predatory fish, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Incoming. Transmission, reported Communications Officer Telvana, her voice barely above a whisper. Put it through, Vexstar ordered, though every instinct told him to run. The universal translator worked quickly, and a calm human voice filled the command center. This is Admiral Ji-Hoon Lee of the United Earth Defense Force, responding to your distress call. We are here to provide humanitarian assistance and defensive support against the Vorthok threat. The words should have been reassuring, but Chancellor Vexstar had spent his entire career studying galactic politics. He knew that conquerors always claimed peaceful intentions at first. The massive fleet surrounding his world told a different story than the Admiral's polite words. Unknown vessel, Vexstar replied carefully. We thank you for responding to our message. However, your fleet appears to be larger than necessary for humanitarian assistance. There was a pause before Admiral Lee responded. Chancellor Vexstar, We came prepared to face an unknown enemy that has been destroying entire worlds. We brought sufficient force to ensure we can protect your people effectively. Commander Kelthara leaned close to the Chancellor. Sir, their smallest ships are more heavily armed than our best military vessels. Oh, if they wanted to conquer us, they could do it in minutes. That's what worries me, Vexstar replied quietly. On the bridge of the Soul Ascendant, Admiral Lee was having his own concerns. The alien ships in orbit around the planet were clearly civilian vessels, cargo haulers, passenger transports, and research ships. There wasn't a single military vessel in sight. Captain Yujin, are you certain these are the same species that sent the distress signal? Admiral Lee asked his communications officer. Yes, sir. The language patterns match perfectly. But Admiral, I'm not detecting any military presence whatsoever. How have they been fighting this Vorthok hive? Admiral Lee studied the tactical display. They haven't been fighting at all. They've been running. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The Calorians weren't warriors. They were peaceful civilians being hunted by something that consumed entire worlds. And now they were terrified of the very people who had come to save them. Open a channel to their leader, Admiral Lee ordered. Full visual. Chancellor Vexstar appeared on the main screen, and Admiral Lee could see the fear in the alien's eyes. The Calorian was trying to hide it, but his body language screamed terror. Chancellor Vexstar, Admiral Lee said gently, I understand our fleet is larger than you expected. We're not here to conquer or harm you. We're here because you asked for help, and my species doesn't ignore calls for help. Your species? Vexstar asked. What do you call yourselves? We're humans, from a world called Earth. We received your message 3 days ago and came as quickly as we could. Behind the Chancellor, other Calorians were whispering frantically. Admiral Lee could hear fragments of their conversation through the open channel. Deathworlders. ... 12. Hostile environment. The quarantine zone. ... Admiral Lee frowned. Chancellor, why do your people seem afraid of us? We're here to help. Star took a deep breath. Admiral Lee, our records show that your world is classified as uninhabitable by galactic standards. The fact that intelligent life evolved there suggests your species is adapted for extreme violence and survival in impossible conditions. We call that being human, Admiral Lee replied with a slight smile. Yes, Earth is a dangerous world. But that's exactly why we're qualified to deal with whatever's been threatening you. Before Chancellor Vexstar could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the Calorian command center. Sir, sensor operator Velkara shouted. Massive hyperspace signatures approaching from the outer system. It's them. It's the Vorthok hive, Admiral. Lee's expression hardened. Chancellor, keep your civilian ships close to the planet. We'll handle this. The human fleet began moving into attack formation, and Chancellor Vexstar realized that these terrifying Deathworlders might be exactly what his people needed to survive. The Vorthok hive mind had consumed 47 species across the galaxy. Each conquest followed the same pattern. Detect prey, send scouting ships, overwhelm with massive numbers, harvest all organic matter, and move to the next target. The process was efficient, predictable, and it never failed. The hive mind studied the approaching Calorian homeworld through its bioship sensors. The readings were familiar: weak civilian vessels, minimal defensive capabilities, and a planetary population that would provide excellent biomass for the hive's continued expansion. But something was different this time. The sensors detected additional ships around the planet, vessels with energy signatures unlike anything in the hive's vast memory banks. The ships were clearly military in design, but they didn't match any known species in the galactic database. The hive mind considered this briefly, then dismissed it as irrelevant. No known species had ever successfully resisted the hive's assault. These new ships were probably just another weak alliance trying to protect the Calorians. The pattern would remain the same. The Vorthok biofleet emerged from hyperspace in their standard formation. Massive living ships that looked like giant insects moved toward the planet, their organic hulls pulsing with digestive acids and neural control systems. Smaller warrior ships swarmed around them like angry wasps. each one carrying thousands of bio-soldiers designed for planetary assault. Admiral Lee watched the enemy fleet approach on his tactical display. The Vorthok ships were unlike anything Earth's military had ever encountered. They moved like living creatures because they were living creatures grown rather than built, evolved rather than designed. Analysis? Admiral Lee asked his tactical officer. Unknown biotechnology, sir, reported Commander Taman Park. The ships appear to be organic constructs. No metal hulls, no recognizable weapon systems. They're approaching in a swarm formation. With no apparent tactical discipline, Admiral Lee frowned. No tactical discipline? It doesn't make sense for a species that's conquered 47 worlds. Captain Minho Park, commanding the dreadnought Inchin's Fury, spoke from the communication screen. Admiral, I think they've never faced real opposition before. Look at their approach. They're not even trying to maintain defensive positions. The Vorthok hive mind was indeed confident. Every species they had encountered used similar tactics, formed defensive lines, attempt long-range combat, retreat when overwhelmed, and finally surrender when cornered. The pattern never changed. But as the biofleet closed in, the human ships did something unexpected. Instead of forming a defensive line, they charged directly at the Vorthok swarm. All ships, attack formation Delta 7, Admiral Lee ordered. Show them what Earth's children can do. The human fleet split into smaller groups and dove into the Vorthok formation like sharks attacking a school of fish. The Soul Ascendant and her escort cruisers punched through the center of the enemy line, their energy weapons tearing through bioships that had never faced directed. Energy attacks, the hive mind reacted with confusion. These new ships were supposed to retreat when faced with overwhelming numbers, but instead they seemed to become more aggressive. The human vessels maneuvered like predators, targeting the largest bioships first and ignoring the smaller warrior craft completely. Captain Minho Park's dreadnought Inchin's Fury engaged 3 massive hive ships simultaneously. The biovessels tried to use their usual tactic of surrounding and overwhelming their target, but the human ship had been designed by a species that understood pack hunting. Target their nervous systems, Captain Park ordered his weapons officer. Those organic hulls have to have central control nodes. The Inchin's Fury fired concentrated energy bursts at specific points on each bioship. The Vorthok vessels, designed to absorb and distribute damage across their entire organic structure, had no defense against surgical strikes that severed their neural pathways. Meanwhile, General Yoon Kim's Marines were preparing for planetary assault. The Hive's smaller warrior ships had managed to penetrate the orbital battle and were heading for the planet's surface. General Admiral Lee's voice came through the comm system. The Vorthok are landing troops on the northern continent. Can your people handle ground combat in alien environments? General Kim smiled grimly. Sir, my Marines trained in the Amazon rainforest, the Sahara Desert, and Antarctica. An alien world is just another Tuesday for us. The human dropships launched from their carriers, heading straight for the Vorthok landing zones. Captain Tae-Hyen Choi led the first wave, his troops equipped with environmental suits designed for Earth's most hostile regions. But as they descended through the planet's atmosphere, Captain Choi made a discovery that changed everything. General, the atmospheric composition is actually less toxic than downtown Beijing on a bad day. Permission to operate without full environmental protection? Granted, General Kim replied. Show these aliens what Deathworlders look like. The Vorthok biosoldiers had been designed to terrify their enemies. They were 8 feet tall, covered in chitinous armor, and equipped with natural weapons that could tear through most materials. They had never encountered prey that didn't flee in terror at first sight. Captain Choi's Marines landed in the middle of a Vorthok staging area and immediately went to work. The biosoldiers, expecting to face panicked civilians or weak security forces, instead found themselves fighting creatures that seemed to enjoy combat. Sergeant Dayun Kim engaged 3 Vorthok warriors simultaneously while coordinating the rescue of trapped Colorian civilians. Sir, the enemy soldiers are big and scary, but they're not very smart. They just charge straight at us. That's because they've never fought anything that fights back, Captain Choi replied, using his plasma rifle to clear a path through the alien attackers. They're used to hunting prey, not fighting predators. The hive mind was experiencing something it had never felt before. Confusion turning to concern, turning to actual fear. These humans fought like nothing in its vast experience. When cornered, they became more dangerous. When outnumbered, they used tactics the hive couldn't understand. When wounded, they fought even harder. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to be enjoying themselves. 3 months after the Battle of Calera Prime, Ambassador Sujin Park stood before the Galactic Council for the first time. The massive chamber fell silent as she walked to the speaker's platform. Representatives from 43 different species watched nervously as this human, this Deathworlder, prepared to address them. The council had been debating what to do about Earth for weeks. The humans had appeared from nowhere, destroyed the Vorthok hive completely, and then done something no one expected. They had simply gone home. Got no territorial claims, no demands for tribute, no attempts at conquest. They had saved the Calorian Federation and asked for nothing in return. Honored representatives, Ambassador Park began, her voice calm and clear. I am here to propose the establishment of the Terran Peacekeeping Accords. Any species facing extinction-level threats may request assistance from Earth. We ask nothing. In return, accept your commitment to peaceful coexistence with your neighbors. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. Councillor Zelthar of the Rigel Consortium stood up. Ambassador Park, your proposal is... unprecedented. What guarantees do we have that Earth won't use this agreement to justify military intervention whenever it chooses? Before Ambassador Park could answer, Chancellor Vexter of the Calorian Federation rose from his seat. The chamber became even quieter as the survivors of the Vorthok attack prepared to speak. Honored colleagues, Vexter said, his 4 eyes sweeping across the assembly, I have seen these humans in battle. I've watched them risk their lives to save civilians of a species they had never met before. They could have conquered our worlds easily, but instead they established hospitals for our wounded and helped us rebuild our defenses. He paused, remembering those terrible days when the hive had seemed unstoppable. When we sent our distress signal, we expected maybe a few refugee ships if anyone responded at all. Instead, Earth sent 127 warships and 50,000 soldiers. They came not to conquer, but to protect.
Counselor Zarkic of the Andorian Trade Alliance leaned forward.
But surely they want something in return.
Oh, no species.
Provides military assistance without expecting compensation. Ambassador Park smiled slightly. Actually, Counselor, that's exactly what we do. It's part of human nature to help those who cannot help themselves. We spent thousands of years learning that lesson on our own world. But your world is classified as a Class 12 death world, protested Counselor Mevtar of the Centauri Republic. How can a species that evolved in such conditions understand the value of peaceful cooperation? Because we had to learn it the hard way, Ambassador Park replied. Earth is indeed a dangerous world. We spent millennia fighting each other, competing for resources and perfecting the art of warfare, but we also learned that our greatest strength comes from protecting those who are weaker than us. She activated a holographic display showing Earth's history. We had wars that nearly destroyed our entire species. We poisoned our own planet with weapons of mass destruction, came very close to extinction several times. But each time, we chose cooperation over conflict, protection over conquest. The display showed images of human peacekeeping missions, disaster relief efforts, and rescue operations. We learned that true strength isn't about dominating others, it's about having the power to protect them and choosing to use it. Counselor Velinara of the Vegan Collective asked the question that everyone was thinking. What happens if we refuse your offer? What if we prefer to handle our own defense? Then you handle your own defense, Ambassador Park said simply. Not offering to force protection on anyone. We're simply saying that if you face a threat you cannot handle alone, Earth will help if you ask us to. Chancellor Vextar stood again. May I share what happened after the battle? He looked around. The chamber. The human fleet could have claimed our worlds as payment for their assistance. Instead, Admiral Lee asked our permission before landing supplies. They helped us rebuild our orbital defenses and trained our security forces. When they left, they gave us communication equipment, so we could contact them if we ever needed help. Again, the Chancellor's voice grew stronger. These humans are not conquerors, they are guardians. And I believe our galaxy needs guardians now more than ever. Over the following weeks, 17 different species submitted formal requests for defensive treaties with Earth. The hive had been destroyed. But there were other threats in the galaxy, pirates, raiders, and worse things that lurked in the dark spaces between stars. Admiral Ji-Hoon Lee, now commanding the newly established Terran peacekeeping fleet, reviewed the requests in his office aboard the orbital station above Earth. Each one told a similar story: peaceful species facing enemies they couldn't fight alone. Sir, his aide captain, Eugen Park, entered with another report. We've received 3 more requests this week. The Tau Ceti colonies are dealing with raiders. The Epsilon Eridani system is facing an asteroid mining dispute that's turned violent. And there's something called the Shadow Fleet attacking trade routes in the Outer Rim. Admiral Lee nodded. Deploy Task Force Alpha to Tau Ceti. Send diplomatic negotiators to Epsilon Eridani. I'll take the main fleet to investigate these Shadow Fleet reports personally. Sir, Captain Park asked, do you think we're taking on too much responsibility? Admiral Lee looked out at the stars through his office window. Captain, when someone asks for help, and you have the power to provide it, you provide it. That's what makes us human. The galaxy was changing. The quarantine zone that had once contained humanity was now the center of a new kind of civilization, one where the strong protected the weak, where extinction was no longer an inevitable fate for peaceful species, and where a single distress signal could bring salvation from the most unlikely source. The Colorians had made their desperate call for help, and in doing so, they had awakened guardians who would reshape the balance of power among the stars forever.